Welcome back. We're doing SmackTalk episode 29 with our special buddy here. You know him well. This is Doc Wing, Mr. Chicken Wing, Ray Morey. How are you, Ray?
Just wonderful.
This episode's on crashing, and who else better to tell us about crashing than Ray? I think we've got about 3 of his crashes in the whole SmackTalk series. So,
but they're fun.
They're fun. Yeah, you're about to see this guy crash this episode. So what he's gonna do is, we've got a helicopter that needs a bit of rebuilding, I guess. And what other way to inspire some rebuilding than to crash it? So he's got a good old T-Rex 600, wants to upgrade it to flybarless. It's flybarred now. So I think we're gonna have a little bit of a crash session.
You think?
Then we're gonna teach you guys how to fix it, what to look for, special things to look at, different tricks to tell if things are bent, how to repair servos, you know, how to do different things like that, right?
You got it.
And you're gonna be our little bit of a co-host.
Oh, I'm just thrilled to death. I got a chubby.
I think it'll be good. So hopefully you guys have been keeping up with the series. Last month we did precision flying with Kyle Dahl, and he just did an awesome job with that. And we just recently released our free episode on YouTube, so go check that out, our free quick tips. And beyond that, you doing okay?
Wonderful.
Now you're from Jersey.
Yep.
How did you guys do for Hurricane Sandy? Were you okay?
Fine.
You okay?
We lucked out.
Boardwalk was fine, no problems.
Only a little bit of water.
Really?
Yeah.
Good for you guys. So we're doing good. We're getting ready for the Orlando helicopter blowout here. This is going to be fun. I'm looking forward to this because crashing is what you do best.
Yeah, baby.
All right, let's go burn his helicopter in. Let's see what we can do. Episode 29, roll it. So we've got our buddy Chicken Wing here, you know, right?
I'm thrilled.
So Chicken Wing has volunteered his Beater 600 to demonstrate for crashing purposes
Eat
for
'em
our
up,
episode
yum, yum.
today.
Eat 'em up.
So Ray's gonna attempt to do some TikToks, and Ray has a bad tendency.
Eat 'em up.
When he does TikToks, he tends to get a little too low sometimes. So Ray, have at it, and after the unfortunate crash, we'll go take a look at it. Ray, let's see these TikToks, all right? All right, so Ray just crashed. It didn't work out as well as we thought it would, but anyway, this is what's left of his 600 Nitro. So it's sitting here running. How are you gonna turn it off if we're Nitro? Number 1, we can just hit throttle kill here. Number 2, we can go for the exhaust. Number 3, we can go for the fuel line. If the motor is really screaming its butt off here, we gotta shut the motor off as soon as we can so that nothing gets damaged inside. So you go over to here, take a look at it. Fastest way, just pull the fuel line. Pull the fuel line from the motor. The motor will shut off in just a second. It should. His is taking a while. And that's the safest way to do it. As soon as you pull the fuel line, it's just gonna kill the motor. It won't run too lean. So that's the most important thing with the Nitro. Just get power completely, get get the motor completely disconnected. If we're doing electric, pull your batteries as soon as you can. That's the first thing you want to do. You want to save whatever you got left as soon as you crash. Next thing to do is to turn off the power, because he's got servos here and stuff's binding like crazy. So he's got a little pin in here, and that doesn't seem to, we can't get to that, so we'll just pull the battery. So we pulled the battery, nothing's connected anymore. So now that nothing's connected, none of the servos are going to be sitting here getting fried. His motor's disconnected, so everything's powered off. Once again, with electrics, pull your batteries as fast as you can. If they're puffing, toss them. Just make it as safe as you can. So this is our post-crash destruction. This is what we got here. Next thing is just to walk around and find all the parts. Well, since he crashed in a pretty confined area, we got all our parts right here. So let's grab all the parts, we'll take it back to the bench, and we're gonna diagnose everything we gotta fix, and we'll walk you through it. Freaking raised records. Okay, so the initial inspection here that we're gonna do is we're just gonna check out everything that broke. Ray, you did it in pretty good.
Nice.
So let's take a look at it. So pretty much the three parts of the helicopter we're gonna look at: head, tail, mainframe. So Ray's got the tail already. Let's take a look at it. So cameraman, if you wanna get it on here so we can see some parts up close.
Blades are good.
So first we'll take a look at the blades. Blades seem to be okay. A good way to test tail blades is just to move them and kind of listen for a crack. No, they're still good. They're still all right. We got a little crack right here, but these will be a beater set of blades, I'd say, right, Ray? So these will be a little bit of a beater set. Moving on here, we've got the tail hub, the tail shaft. It looks decent, you know. We might need to change it. We'll spin it up and see how we'll see what we can see. Tail boom's obviously done, it's got a kink in it. The torque tube's obviously done, it's got a kink in it too. Boom support's done. Tail fin survived though, so that's good. So boom is about normal damage, I'd say. Now we'll look at the head. So if we look at the head, his blades are pretty well done here, I'd say. You can see a split, and they're just not, they're done here. He destroyed them pretty good. But what we're gonna show you, I do wanna show you this guy. I'm gonna show you how to fix something like this. I'm gonna show you how to fix a nice little dent, because I seem to get these all the time. If canopy thumb screws come off or something of that nature. So moving on, we'll look at the head here. This is a flybarred head, so there's a lot more stuff up here. But the biggest things to notice are things like this. The blade grips, the steel ball just got completely stripped out and bent on the blade grip. And the head is just messed up, and there's mixer arms, and everything's a little bit damaged, I would say. So what we're gonna do is just pull everything apart, look for the bent parts. Real big things to keep in mind. Keep in mind if you've got any sort of arms like this for anti-rotation or anything. When you change the metal part too, change the bolt out too, because a lot of times these bolts will get bent and they can throw off your tracking. Moving down to mainframe, let's take a look here. We'll look at the mainframe damage. He's got cracked frames all over the place. He's got a cracked frame back here. This isn't your first crash on this model, is it?
Are you kidding me?
It's got cracked mainframe here, cracked mainframe here, cracked mainframe here. I would say these frames have had it, finally.
It's like,
They're done.
hey, that's,
They're done.
well, I got new frames anyway.
Well, so we're gonna change the frames. Frames are all done.
Oh, yeah.
Smack that. But if you look, things like fuel tank's fine, main gear's fine. Electronics, some of the servos are busted. This elevator servo is busted. We'll pull all the electronics, take a look at it. Muffler's okay. That's good, because that's a bit of an expense right there. Motor seems to be fine. It was still idling when he crashed. That's all right. Skids will fix that. Electronics seem to be okay too. So on a crash from a scale of 0 to 10 and how bad it is, 10 being the worst, I'd say we're at about a 6 here. You know, mainly because we broke a frame. Maybe 7 because we broke a frame.
I wanted a 9.
The only thing that would make it a 9 is killing your flybarless unit, if you have one, your receiver, and your motor. That would make it a 9. A 10 is when everything goes up in flames. 10 is when the whole thing is covered in flames and there's nothing left. So that's what we got to fix. What we're going to do is I'm going to show you some things to check on and how to make sure that when you rebuild it, you can fix everything you need to, because we don't want to overlook anything. So we assess the damage. Let's get into it a little bit deeper. Well, he hit the ground, and now we're assessing the damage. So most important things we need to take a look at are, at least in the head part, we're going to take a look at the main shaft and we're going to take a look at the spindle. So the way we're going to do that, I've taken off one grip right here on his head, or I've taken off one blade so far on his head. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to see if the spindle is straight. So the rule is, that I always do, is if you break the blades, change the spindle. But if you don't feel like changing parts just for the heck of it, let's do this method. So the best way to do it is to take one blade off, put your driver in, and just twist it. And what we're looking for is, we're looking for either the tip of the blade to deflect here. So if I were to just hold the blade straight at the camera and rotate it, we'd be seeing it go up and down if it were bent. But I don't know if we can do that one, because this one might be tweaked a little bit. Another method that I do is when I twist it, I put my fingers right here in between the head block and the blade grip and turn the wrench. And when I turn the wrench, if it's bent, I'll feel it kind of squeeze my finger as it's going up or down. So that's how we're going to check the spindle. This one, I'd say we'll change it just for the heck of it. Maybe slightly tweaked. Now we check the main shaft. Remove the head and everything else, and this fuel's all over the place. So we're going to check the main shaft. Best way to do it is just to spin it and look at it. That's his tail gear making that noise. But it looks pretty straight, and then from a top-down sort of a view, it looks pretty straight. Another way to do it, I've done this too, just start the motor up and rev it up and you'll see the main shaft wobble or not. Once again, this one's kind of on the verge. If it were me, I would change it anyway. I think a line gives you two in a package anyway. So for this purpose, we got to change main shaft and spindle. So even though we need to change the frames on this model, as we've already discussed it, there's some other things we can do while we're fixing it to make our life easier. So if you see the model, he's missing one side of his skids. He's missing the complete right side of the skids. So when we have to rebuild it, it's just sitting here kind of on its side. So even though I have to change the frames, I'm going to put new skids on it simply so I can just sit here and work on it easier. So let's do that. I really want to show you guys how to take a look at the tail shaft and the tail output shaft and the tail hub. These are two really overlooked pieces when you crash. Now, thank you, Mr. Maury. Now, the telltale sign of this is to take a look at the tail blades. Since he didn't break the tail blades, I think that for the most part the tail hub's probably pretty straight and the tail shaft is probably pretty straight. Tail output shaft, you can just kind of wing it by, just twirl it by hand and just take a look at the end. Either this way, looking straight down on it this way, or looking straight down on it on the edge here. I think for the most part his output shaft is straight, but there's no real good way to check the hub. So we're going to take the hub out here and I'm going to show you a good way to check it real quick. We got to take some things off real quick, but let me show you how to check the tail hub. Okay, so here's how we're going to check the tail hub. Once again, this is really overlooked, and a lot of times, especially like on my X7, if I crash and break a tail blade, I'll change the tail hub every time because it just spins so fast, and if you don't and the hub is bent, you're going to get a woo sort of sound when you try to repair it, or when you try to fly it again. So here's how we're going to check it. What I've got is just a cordless drill with a chuck, and what I've got is I've got the tail hub, and I removed one grip off of it right here. So you want to make sure that your drill spins very concentric. Now this one is only used for demonstration purposes, but this one kind of spins a little bit crooked. So you want to try to find, you know, a drill that really spins nice and straight. So if you have a drill press, this is perfect for it. But here's the method that I'm going to show you anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the hub and we're going to put it into the chuck and we're going to tighten it up a little bit, just a little bit. Then what we're going to do is we're going to hold the blade grip with our hand and we're just going to spin it nice and slow. And you can see it going in and out. You can see the blade bolt flexing. Now, this thing does not spin as concentric as I'd like it, but you know what? This is wobbling way too much for me. I think we bent the hub. So we're going to change this hub out because he's got a little bit of damage on the tail blades. And this is Ray we're talking about. Ray's probably crashed this hub 10 times already. So we'll change the hub out. So while we got all the guys working on the helicopter here, Ray's just sitting here smoking and yelling at people. It's a good point, it's a good time to mention something for you nitro guys out there. This is fuel tank. Take a look. Fuel tank's okay, but a lot of times what happens in hard crashes is this kind of thing. Fuel magnet will pop off, or the clunk will pop off, or your fuel tubing will split. So if you have a really hard crash like what we had earlier, check your clunk. Take it out. Check it. So let's start talking about the frame. the frame. And this happens a lot with some of the, especially the big electrics. They're just so fast and so powerful that when you slam the ground, sometimes you're going to break frames. So there's a few different ways that you can change it. Some are better, some methods are better than the other, and they just help make your life a little bit easier when changing it. So we've just had some of the guys here helping because the carnage is pretty bad. So this is Ray's frame here. It's pretty busted up, as you can see. I mean, this side doesn't even have the any spot for the fuel tank, so the fuel tank's out already. So there's a few different ways to do it. They've already removed the motor. They've already removed some brackets here. So the first thing we can do with removing a frame is we can just remove one whole side. So if you just want to replace one whole side at a time, seems to be easier. So you just remove all your screws from the right side, let's just say. They'll take a brand new frame, put it on there. That way everything lines up. We know where all the spacers go. If this is your first frame change, it might be a good idea. These guys have crashed this 600 so many times, they know exactly where every piece goes. But if you just bought a brand new model and you're not sure where everything goes, try one side at a time. So you can do the right side first, then you can do the left side, and everything kind of stays together. This one, we got to pull electronics and everything, so we're just going to completely strip this down. So let's strip it down, and then we'll take a look at some of the electronics. So we're going to pull the frame, start rebuilding it, and then we'll pull all the electronics out and we'll see what's left. So now that we've got the frame stripped down, like some of the, I don't want to say cheaper helicopters, but some of the helicopters out there ship with some hardware that tends to strip on you. So even though I've got a really good wrench here, some of the bolts have stripped on me. So let's take a look at how to remove a strip bolt out of the helicopter. Alright, so we've got our helicopter here. This is our culprit. This is a strip bolt. It's a 3mm bolt, but it's got it uses a 2mm, we always call it the red size wrench. And as you can see in here, it's just completely stripped out. It doesn't want to turn it off. So this is what you need. You need two things. You need a Dremel with a cutoff wheel, and you need a flat-headed screwdriver. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take the Dremel and we're going to cut a flat spot in it. Oh yeah, and eye protection, always. We're going to cut a flat spot in it. And try not to cut into the frames too bad. So with the flat spot, what that allowed us to do is we can now take our flathead wrench, our flat-headed screwdriver, and get some torque on it. And just like that, we got out the bolt that was nice and stripped. So we'll remove it here so you can take a look at it. Now this has saved me so many times, and you know what, as good as the hardware is, just if a bolt's older especially, it just gets removed a lot, after a while sometimes they strip. So this is the bolt. You can see here we ground a nice flat spot in there. You can see it right there. So yeah, use this trick whenever you need it. Dremel and a flathead. Hooray! So while we're fixing here, we're making some good progress actually. Many hands make light work. We got the new frame together actually, it's going okay. So the point that I want to make here is we're putting a lot of bolts together. Cameraman, if you want to come take a look at this. We're putting a lot of bolts into the frame, and if you take a look here, I mean, a lot of the bolts have Loctite on them already. So if it's something stupid like a bolt going into like a main shaft bearing block, I mean, you can afford to lose one of those. Like there's two skid bolts here, you can afford to lose it. What I'm saying is it's not like the most important bolt on the frame. I don't re-Loctite them. There's already Loctite on it. I would just stick them back in. So for instance, these two bolts here going into the engine mount, they already had Loctite on them, so I'm not even re-Loctiting them. Now for something really important, like I'd say skids are pretty darn important, I'll re-Loctite those and then I'll put it back together. But for most of the bolts that we've got going on here, I don't even re-Loctite it. Just save your time. Be economic. Go green. Thank you. That's all. Now it's time to talk about how to fix a damaged rotor blade. Here you can see I've got just a rotor blade from the field that I found that one of the guys had crashed, and you can see the tip is all destroyed here, and so this blade is no longer flyable. But what I did was I made a little indentation here using a hammer and a screwdriver, just to show you guys the kind of damage that you'll see sometimes, even on like a new set of blade if you have a part come off your helicopter during flight. So let's say like if a canopy screw comes off, or a boom support bolt, or anything like that, you know, usually like a 3 or 4 millimeter bolt can make a good size whack like this, right in the blade, right along the leading edge. And what it'll do is it'll actually start whistling and just make a lot of loud noises. Now the thing is here, this blade is totally usable. The way we tell is we're going to do what I call a little bit of a stress. We're going to put a little bit of stress and a little bit of torsion on this blade, and we're going to listen. Now if the blade makes any sort of cracking noise, I would be very cautious to use it again. So let's see if it's going to make any sort of noise here. So I'm going to twist it first. No, it's okay. Now I'll flex it this way. And that's okay. I think it's fine. I'm not hearing any noises here. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a few tools here. We're going to use some CA. We're going to use some kicker. We're going to use some sandpaper, electrical tape, and a Sharpie to fix this blade and almost make it brand new again. So let's take a look. So what we want to do is we want to fill this with CA, and we just want to get it to the point to where it's almost like the original airfoil, just to kind of fill it in and get any noises out of it that might come out. So what I've done is I've cut a few pieces of electrical tape already, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply the electrical tape here to each side of the blade. So I put one side here, so it kind of makes a little trench that way. Took the other piece here, and I'll apply it on this side. So now what you can see I've done once I put the tape there is I've made the little it's almost like a little hole where I want to fill this full of CA. And electrical tape's great because it kind of breaks free of the CA real easily. So here I'm going to take my CA, which is actually Loctite super glue. This stuff works great. And I'm just going to fill the gap with the super glue. So I gave it a good amount of super glue. And I'm going to sit here and I'm going to kick it. Okay. I'm going to put some more CA on. Well, I don't want it to run too much. I'm going to kick it. I'm going to wipe it from the blade real quick before it cures on the other side of my blade, which I don't want. Okay, so as you can see here, I've got a good amount of glue right here. So I kind of caked it up, and it's now kind of over the blade tip here. And that's what we want. We want it to stick it over here. Now I put too much CA on here, so I don't want to get crazy away with it. But I wanted to put enough on to cover it, really. So what I can do is I can peel my tape off, peel this off, and if you're careful, unlike I was, you'll only have CA right here filled in. So you can see right here, we've got it nice and filled in to where I wanted it earlier. So now simply all I'll do is I'll take some sandpaper and I'll just kind of sand it down to kind of match the airfoil shape. Now it also helps too to have a file. Sometimes a file might help you out with this to get it just to line up a little bit better. So then what I can do is I can really take some time on it, kick it, CA it, and really fill it in until it's real smooth to the touch with some sandpaper with a file. Lastly, if it's a black blade, Sharpie, sit here and you'll just color it in. Color in the CA. And you'll never know that the blade was damaged. So just spend some time on it. That's the rough method right there of how we're going to do it. Spend some time on it. You can get it nice and smooth. And you'll save yourself a set of rotor blades that you can use for practice. Cool. So we still have the guys hard at work here. We've been working all day. It's been a full day production here. But it's time to check out our electronics, and we just took a look over everything, and you just want to notice anything just for obvious stuff. So if it's a battery, notice if it's puffed, notice if it has any damage to it. If it's a receiver, notice if there's any damage. Boot everything back up, see if everything's okay. Now if you know why your helicopter went in, then you just have to fix what's crashed. But if you don't know what went wrong, then you need to see what you can figure out, like what tools you've got at your disposal in order to figure out why it went in. For instance, if you were flying a V-bar, there's a log, there's an event log that shows you what went on. If you're flying Castle, there's a log in there that shows you what's going on in terms of voltage, head speed, all sorts of things like that. Even some of the things like Spectrum, they've got telemetry in their receiver packs. So there's different ways, different clues that you can use to help you figure out exactly what went wrong with everything. But one thing I wanted to show you was servos, these guys. So in a nitro there's 5, electric there's 4. So this is what you want to look at when checking for a servo, and I'm going to show you how to take it apart. So here's a servo here. This is 9451. This is what Ray had on Cyclic. And the best way to test it, honestly, is just to twist it with your hand. And you just want the horn to rotate nice and freely. No cracking, no sort of binding in anything. You also want to inspect the servo horn too. I know these Futaba servo horns are very strong. I've used them for many years. And if they don't crack in a crash, then the splines didn't strip. But I know there's other horns, like some of the Align ones that they use on the 700. The spline itself can kind of crack. And if you don't change it out, sometimes you go to fly again and wham, you know, something will slip and you're going to crash again. So definitely keep that in mind. You know, you have to change servo horns as well. So this one feels fine. What I'll do is I'll power it up, make sure it centers, make sure everything's okay. Once it powers up fine, I know I can reuse this. We got another servo that Ray busted up pretty good, so let's take a look at that one. So as we're fixing here, we're looking at a little bit of the electronics, and the first thing I'm seeing is this servo. It's completely done. This was his elevator servo. This happens to be a Futaba 9451. And as you can notice here, he broke the tabs clean off. So when you break servos, there's a few different things to consider. Number one, what kind of servo do you have? If you've got a higher end servo, like say JR, Futaba, I think High-Tech does this as well. If you do something like this, if you break off the tab like this, and when you put the horn on, and it really won't turn too much, you know what, you might want to consider sending it back to service. Both Futaba and JR, I believe they service Spectrum as well, Horizon. You can send them back to the local distributor in the country. So for instance, in the US for Futaba, you'd send it to Habaco, JR, you'd send it to Horizon. And they've got a service center. So you could send back this busted servo just like this, write a nice little note, explain what happened, send it in, and they'll call you and tell you what's wrong with it, how much it's going to cost to fix it. And sometimes it's not a bad deal. So for instance, this 9451's been around for a while, so it might not be worth it to repair, but maybe if you've got a brand new servo that just came out on the market and you have extreme damage like this, they can fix it for you for maybe less than half of the price of buying a new one. So if it's a high-end servo like that, send it back, see what they can do for you. If it's I don't want to say not as quality, but some of the servos, I don't believe they do tech support. I know like Align servos, if you trash one, you can't send it back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to repair a servo, and hopefully this can help you out if you ever break one and don't feel like sending it back. So let's take a look. This one, the gears aren't turning, so let's go inside and take a look at it and see what's wrong with this servo. So we've got our servo here. Let's take a look at it and see what broke. So as you can tell, the top case is broken on here, so he'd have to order a new one or once again send it back to service. But in this case, a top plastic case is maybe, I don't know, 10 bucks at most. So let's take it apart and see what's wrong with it. So the first thing we're going to do when taking apart a servo is we're going to take off all 4 screws here. Just a Phillips head. So the first thing that I'm going to keep in mind once I've loosened the servos is I'm going to pull off this bottom half away from here, and I'm going to keep this little tab on. This is where all your motors and the pots and all the guts of the servo are. So let's pull it apart from here. So I pulled it apart, and we're going to try to keep everything together as good as possible. I know that this gear was right here when I took it apart. So if I can, I keep usually these 4 bolts in the bottom, and it just helps me work on it better. So this servo, for example, is all metal gear. This is the 9451. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off the gears one by one, noting how I'm going to put them back together, and I'm just going to inspect for any stripped teeth. So if I remove this top one here, you can see metal gear, and this one looks okay actually. This gear seems just fine. This is where the pin is. So I'll put this over here. The next servo, I'm going to take a look, metal gear. Sorry, the next servo gear, metal gear. This one seems fine. Oops. So we'll pull that off. Next, this one's coming off the little rubber seal. Let's take our rubber seal off and put it off to the side. Then we'll take off the main drive gear and take a look at that. And you know what? That one looks pretty good too. Sometimes the metal gears can bind and they can cause some problems, but these metal gears look pretty good. So I'm willing to bet our culprit is in the plastic here. Let's take a look. Let's do some finer inspection here. Oops. Well, in this case, I believe our plastic gear is okay. This has got me slightly worried. So I think that this gear really got busted beyond belief. there's a few things that can happen. Either the pins can get bent, and especially because it's metal gears, everything can just bind up against each other and just really get nasty. So in a normal case, let's just say the goal of this servo is to have this gear stripped first, this plastic gear. That's why they put one sacrificial gear in here. But just taking a look at it visually, it looks fine. So I think it's okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it back together. But this one, if I ever encountered something like this, I would send it back to service just because I can't figure out why it's wanting to bind up. So here's how we're going to put it back together. So let's just say this gear's stripped and we need to put a new one in. So we'll pretend that we just changed this gear here. So what we're going to do first is we're actually going to take the rubber seal and we're going to put it all the way around the servo. This is what I recommend doing first. This is a good way to get that rubber seal on without it being a pain in the butt. So I'm going to put it around the whole edge and kind of slide it down a little bit. As you can see here, I just slid it down a little bit. Now I'll put the plastic gear in first and I'm just going to rebuild the servo exactly how I pulled it out. So plastic gear goes on first. Second, the metal gear, and notice the stop here. The stop always goes towards the wire, towards the edge of the case. And you can see this gear is going to stop. In the plastic case here, it's got a little recess. You can see our two stop points right here. And that's what's going to keep the servo from completely moving around. Next, I'm going to put this gear on next. This gear down here. Oh, this gear goes here, my bad. So this gear's going to go right here. And lastly, we're going to put this gear back on. Let's see, let's get that on. And sometimes it just takes a little finagling. So we got that on there. Let's see, we'll pull it up, push it down, tighten this down here. We're good here. Now if we turn the gear by hand, we can see it all. If we turn the whole servo by hand, we can see it all working okay. And lastly, that one pin is still stuck in the case. So that's going to help align it up a little bit. So cool. So I put it back together. Imagine we just got a new top part. So I'm going to put it together kind of just a little bit tight. The very last step, now that we've got the here, is we slide this rubber part up. See, it's a nice seal around now. We would push it down, tighten our 4 bolts, and we're done. So it's a busted servo, take it apart and put back together again. Let's send this one off to service and see if they can fix it. And one more thing to note here, that since we're mainly working with metal gears, it doesn't matter too much. But one thing to notice, if these are plastic gears in here, and you stripped one, make sure you clear out all of this inside from the plastic gears that have been broken off. I recommend just using a Q-tip because they can get lost in the white grease that they use sometimes. So just dig in here, make sure you don't have any floating plastic gears because that'll actually strip out your new gears that you just got. So definitely keep an eye out for that. And if you need to, you can just put some more grease in here. I believe they recommend a white lithium grease just for all sorts of gears on the servos. But that's pretty much it in terms of the servo rebuild. So we've been here working on Ray's helicopter, his wreckage, I guess we could say. And our good buddy Quan, he's got an NX4 and he just keeps flying it and flying it and flying it and flying it and flying it. And I think he ran out of fuel. So as we were working, he ran in. And this is about his 11th flight of the day or something. And I gotta say, just looking from here, Quan has that's the coolest position a helicopter could ever be in when it crashes. So cameraman, if you want to walk on up here, we'll look at the Quan, nice job, sir.
Thank you.
That's awesome, Quan. That's the best. Oh, hold on, don't touch it.
Yeah.
That's how it landed.
Just the room band, nothing else.
Did you run out of fuel?
Yeah.
Too little? Not enough fuel?
No, yeah.
Can you see it, cameraman? If you want to come around here. This is Quan. This is like the shape of a lawn dart, Quan. So now that we've seen this, we'll inspect the damage, always with nitro. Motor's off first, turn the switch off second, nothing's bound up. And we can take a look at it. Blades are, we got a little crack here. Skids are okay. And he's got a linkage blown. Servos are all good. Damn, Quan, this is way better than Ray's crash. You didn't break as much stuff. Oh, tail servo got it. Tail servo stripped. But everything else, he's okay. So Quan, and then your boom. It's a Scorpion. It's a Scorpion. Here you go. Send that to George from Scorpion. He can use it for promo. That's Quan's crash. So we made some really good progress here today. This is Ray's helicopter that we destroyed earlier, and with about the help of 8 guys here, we got the thing almost freaking back together. Quite impressive. So as you can see, Ray decided to upgrade to a flybarless head here. Same principles apply. We applied we put a new spindle in, put a new main shaft in, because the other ones were bent anyway. We made new linkage rods, and we checked all the balls, and we tried to make sure that everything was tight in here. You know, re-tightened all the balls. You Loctite on the parts that we thought were important. Engine's fine, so I think he's good there. So we don't have enough parts in the field today, but what we're going to do is we're going to go back to Ray's camper tonight, grab all the parts that he needs, and then tomorrow we'll come out here and we'll finish it up, and we'll show you how we're going to check it over to fly again. See you guys tomorrow. So how's it going? We're here on day 2. How's the rebuild going, Ray?
Wonderful.
Did you work on it last night?
Nope.
He didn't work on it last night. Well, as you can see here, we've pretty much got a new helicopter. This is pretty phenomenal, the amount of work that Ray's done. And it helps when you got some people helping you out too. But anyway, so we finished up all the mechanicals yesterday. And just like we noted yesterday, you really want to take a look at those important things. Your spindle, main shaft, tail output shaft, those are your real important things. You know, your torque tube, your tail belt. But the little things like this on the frame, you know, little bolts holding in the main shaft bearing blocks and stuff, don't get too held up with that. What'd you see?
Tail. Not hooked up.
The tail? Oh, he didn't hook the tail up right. All right, well, for the most part, everything looks good to go here. So what we're doing, he converted to flybarless, but it would be the same sort of thing. You'd plug your servos back in, make sure everything's working as they should, make sure nothing's binding. So we're just setting up a new flybarless model here with his V-bar. So we're gonna do that, and then I'll show you what we're gonna look at before we test fly it after the accident, crash. So we got it all back together. Here it is. I can't believe we did it. We fixed it pretty quickly actually for how bad the damage was. We pretty much did a whole new rebuild. So as you can see here, he put a new head on, he put some new servos in. So if you were to ever crash your model, these are the things you want to look at when you think you're all ready to go before you're about to go fly. So you just had a nasty crash like Ray did. And now these are a few things that I always do when I have a really nasty crash to get me back up in the air safely. Number 1, put some kind of crappy blades on. They're just carbon fiber. I don't even know what the heck they are. They're not even labeled or anything. Just put some crappy blades on just to test hover. If something were to be reversed or something happens and you only broke a crappy set of blades, once you get maybe 2 flights on it and you trust the model, then you can put your good blades on and give it a go. The next thing, servos. So these guys, the servo screws. Always make sure you check all 5 of them. 5 of them in a nitro, 4 of them in an electric. So we just checked every one of his servo screws. We Loctited them, cranked them down, so those are good to go. So we know that those aren't going to come out. Beyond that, it's what I call the important bolts. The important bolts are things that hold, if one of them comes out, it's a really bad day. This is an important bolt, the Jesus bolt, check that. Your bottom Jesus bolt, that's an important bolt, check that. Your tail hub, back here, when you've got your tail hub on this side, your 1 bolt holding down the tail hub to the tail shaft, that's an important bolt, check that. Lastly, your throttle linkage, check that. With electric, once again, check your settings with an electric, take your blades off, spin it up without the blades on there, just to be sure everything's okay. Finally, with flybarless, one of the things I always check, make sure your compensation's good. Make sure that it's compensating the correct way that it should, which it is, and then aileron wise as well. You can see it's correcting as it should. So pretty much after you do that, you can go fly. Just if you want to goop your wires down, you can do that. But beyond that, I think that we got this thing fixed pretty well, and I'm pretty happy with it. For Ray's machine, this thing looks brand new. This will look 2 years old in about a week, so no problem. Well, let's go test hover it, make sure it's good. Oh. Success. I changed the curve. Right, it's working. After smashing it like crazy, we fixed it. Oh yeah. Now that is how you fix a helicopter after a nasty crash. Nice job, Ray. Done. Got it. Thanks guys for watching episode 29, Crashing. Hopefully you learned a little bit about how to repair everything and a little bit more of an in-depth look of what to look at. So yeah, we did a little bit of everything in this episode. We'll definitely, we got one more coming for you guys before the end of the year for episode 30. So on behalf of Mr. Chicken Wing and myself, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. All right. So, we got the crash. Let me see. Wait, hurry up, Ray.
Shut the f up.
Okay, that's good. To help you figure out exactly what went wrong with everything. But we know what happened. Ray just flat out dumb thumbed. Ooh, 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 ooh. We almost had another one here.